Welcome, everyone, to this wonderful panel discussion that we have planned today. My name is Stacy Rutland. I'm founder of Income Movement. So happy to see everybody joining us today. Really great to have so many people involved in this conversation. I want to do a few kind of logistics things at the front, and then we'll start to introduce our host and panelists for this conversation. So this panel discussion, which is titled Economic Justice in the 21st Century, the Intersectionality of Race, Class, and Guaranteed Income. This is number 2 in a 3-part Guaranteed Income event series. We had one last week that the title of which was Why Cash Matters, Reimagining Our Economic Systems and Social Safety Net, and Thinking About Direct Cash Programs. You can see that in our Crowdcast account. There's a link there to that that happened last week if you're interested in catching that. Next week on Wednesday, the May 5th, we'll have our 3rd event series. The title of that is Equity, Safety, and Autonomy, Building Economic Systems that Support Women. We'll have Representative Rashida Tlaib as part of that, and Mayor of Madison, Wisconsin, as well as a wide variety of subject matter experts to talk more about the role of direct cash programs and how we can actually build legislation and systems in place that are thinking about the roles of women and thinking about how women's lives work to make it so that we're as inclusive as possible as we move forward with what we know are some changes that need to happen to our economic system. So at the end of this event, we'll share the links to both of those, and I think maybe somebody already did in there, so you can check those out after the fact. We'll repost them at the end of this conversation. Before we get into tonight's event, I want to just spend a moment to thank our partners with Income Movement who have worked tirelessly over the last month to pull this event series together. Our partners are Inherent Good, which is a documentary film. Actually just ran right before this. So I know many of you guys had the opportunity and the pleasure of being able to watch that film. It's a film that focuses on basic income and tells the important stories of guaranteed income through the lens of both women who have received and been part of demonstrations, guaranteed income demonstrations, as well as looking deeper into a small town and what's happening with their local economy and the role that a guaranteed income or basic income could play. So really happy to have the Inherent Good film be part of this wonderful event series to really help lay the groundwork for what guaranteed income and basic income is and why it's worth really thinking about what that could do for our current systems at the state, local, state, and also federal level. The other partner that's been working with us on this is Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. And today you'll see and get to hear from one of the mayors that is part of that amazing coalition of mayors across the country who are working for, advocating for guaranteed income, and many of which, including tonight's panelist, are working on pilots and demonstrations in their regions. So we'll be able to hear a little bit more about that. But thank you so much to our partners. I'll walk through a little bit. If this is your first time on Crowdcast, it's pretty straightforward, not really all that different than many of the other tools that are out there. There's a Ask a Question button at the bottom of your screen. That's the place where we will collect questions from the audience. And the first about 35 minutes of this event will be kind of pre-set questions that we thought would be a really good groundwork for setting the tone and covering some of the fundamentals of this topic. But we'll definitely open it up to audience Q&A for the last 15 or 20 minutes. So put your questions there. In the meantime, over on the right-hand side is chat. Pretty familiar with that, I'm sure you all are, but just feel free to drop comments in there. If you're excited about something or really love that something that someone's saying, feel free to use that as a way to kind of document the energy that you're feeling as you listen to this really fabulous conversation. Okay, all of that is now done. We can set that aside and actually get to the conversation that we're going to have tonight. So the first person that I want to introduce is Rennie Soga, and I'm going to, there she is. I'm going to bring her up on the stage. Rennie is going to be our host and facilitator through this conversation. And Rennie is one of the producers of the Inherent Good film that we just discussed and that many of you were able to watch. She's also a producer of the second season of More Than Enough, which is a podcast led by Mia Birdsong, where they're actually focusing on the Magnolia Mothers Trust demonstration. And we're lucky enough to both have Rennie here, as well as the director and lead of that demonstration, so Aisha Nyandoro. So really excited to have Rennie here. She's one of the crusaders in this movement for guaranteed income. She's an amazing storyteller and advocate, and so happy to have her here. So I'm going to hand it over to Rennie.
Oh, thank you so much, Stacy, for that introduction. And thank you to all of you who are joining us this evening and everyone at Income Movement and at Mayors for Guaranteed Income for offering this space and community for us to have this very timely conversation with some of our key leaders, doing this important economic justice work in the South. And so I'd like to go ahead and introduce some of our wonderful panelists that are joining us this evening, starting with Aisha Nyandoro. Aisha is the CEO of the Springboard to Opportunities, and that is a nonprofit that's working with residents of affordable housing to keep to help them reach their goals in school and work and life. She also leads a groundbreaking guaranteed income pilot program called the Magnolia Mothers Trust. And it was one that was also featured in our documentary that you may have seen just before this panel. And right now, which is super exciting, and I can't wait for her to share what's been going on with that program, but they're now in their third cohort of women. So this is focused on low-income Black mothers living in Jackson, Mississippi, and they're each getting $1,000 in cash monthly, no strings attached for 1 year. So really excited to have Aisha with us today. We also are honored to have Mayor Lauren Poe here. Mayor Poe is currently the mayor of Gainesville, Florida, and he's a member of the Mayors for Guaranteed Income. He's partnered with a wonderful new nonprofit in Gainesville called Community Spring, and that is specifically designed like pilot that is going to give a monthly guaranteed income to those transitioning out of incarceration. Mm-hmm. So excited to learn more about that. And we also have here today, Sarah Beth Gell is the Director of Research at the Southern Economic Advancement Program, otherwise known as SEEP. It's an organization that's building coalitions and amplifying the efforts of existing organizations and networks in the South, and that work towards sort of broadening economic power and building a more equitable future. And also joining us, and I think, Stacy will let us know when she can, is Reverend Liz Theo Harris. And she's the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, which is a national call for moral revival, and is also co-led by Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. And that's the largest coordinated wave of nonviolent civil disobedience in the 21st century America. And it has since emerged as one of the nation's leading social movement forces, working to elevate voices in their community and who are fighting for economic justice. So hopefully she'll be able to join us in just a few moments. But first, I kind of want to, that's a lot to digest. But let's first lay the groundwork for why we're all here and listening to these wonderful panelists. So why is the shift towards guaranteed income or direct cash programs so critical to the fight for racial justice? So to help set a foundation for this question about the basic income advocate and former Kentucky State Senator, Charles Booker, has pulled together some of his thoughts for this conversation. So let's hear from Charles, and then we'll bring this back to the larger group for a bigger conversation.
Hey everybody, this is Charles Booker. former state representative here in Kentucky for the 43rd District. I'm also president and founder of Hood to the Holler, your fellow good troublemaker, and I am a part of the income movement. And I'm proud to be, because this is a movement for justice, for healing, for accountability, for structural change, and we all have to be a part of it. And as we have witnessed the height of racial tension, certainly over the last year, and the bottom falling out for so many people in the midst of this pandemic, which has really allowed a greater number of folks to see the challenges that folks like me in my community have been crying out for years, because poverty is generational where I'm from. I'm from what has been for years the poorest zip code in Kentucky, and it's an area wherein the majority of the population is Black, brown, extremely marginalized, because Louisville is very hyper-segregated. And so when I think about racial justice and true healing and accountability and transformation in our communities, I immediately go to universal basic income, and as Dr. King spoke, a guaranteed annual income, because the fact of the matter is our humanity is so much more than our hourly wage, and we are dealing with poverty that is a policy choice. It's a budgetary decision, and it's something that has been perpetuated that is crippling communities like mine all over the country, tying back to our history in racism. And so when we're trying to address issues of crime, issues of health inequity, building infrastructure, ultimately we have to understand how important it is to invest in people. And that's why universal basic income is critical to me. It's central to the fight for racial justice, because it is the definition of what it means to have the freedom and liberty to live a gainful life, to think beyond your struggles, to chart a new course. And when you understand, like I do, how we have built a system that criminalizes poverty, how do you disrupt that? It's not by putting more people in jail. It's by not ignoring the fact that when folks are not having the resources to put food on their table, keep a roof over their head, suffering from trauma that they can't get treated because they don't have adequate health care, there are no jobs in the community, they don't have resources and options to choose paths for themselves, we're creating an environment where a whole lot of pain and struggle can be the commonplace. And by investing directly in people, giving them financial freedom to make decisions in their lives, they will do it. We will do it. Of course, we will. And so racial justice is about healing. It's not about saying that any one person should account for the ills of our history, but it's understanding that we have built a lot of institutions and a lot of structures and a lot of habits and a lot of policies on the back of chattel slavery, on the back of this very ingrained inequity that we have to dismantle together, all of us. And so as a proud supporter of universal basic income for years here in Kentucky, I'm excited to see the growing momentum, because we realize collectively that in order for us to end poverty, we have to make sure that we are investing directly in people, and that justice means that we finally get a fair share and equity stake of the economy that we have built. And when I say we, yes, I'm talking about the Black community, but I'm talking about all of us. So many hardworking people across Kentucky, across the country, that have put their blood, sweat, and tears into lifting up these industries that have made incredible profits while paying hardworking folks so little. The way we upend that is by saying we're finally going to give the people an equity stake in their future. And so I'm seeing a growing coalition in Kentucky. Everywhere I go in the Commonwealth, folks all over the political spectrum are saying, yes, we need a universal basic income. And you know what? This pandemic has allowed more people to see that this isn't just a talking point. It isn't just a policy that some folks that don't understand issues are lifting up to sound important. No, we actually need this so that we can be prepared for the next pandemic. Because truthfully, poverty, gross inequity, structural and systemic racism have been our pandemics for a long time. So I'm proud to be a part of the income movement. Thank you for this very important and timely conversation as we push to pull up the roots of racism, to make sure that poverty is a thing of the past, we need to do that work that Dr. King spoke of and bend the arc, that moral arc of the universe towards justice, and it includes a universal basic income.
Wonderful. Such powerful words. I'm going to bring the panelists back so that we can start to build on some of the framework that Charles Booker just laid out for us.
Yeah, that was great. You know, what really stood out to me, and I was struck by his words when he said, giving people an equity stake in their future, which is personally for me is one of, I think, the most transformative aspects of guaranteed income. So what I would like to do is to hear the other panelists' thoughts. And so, you know, why is this shift towards guaranteed income or direct cash payments, you know, critical to the fight for racial justice? And, you know, I don't know if Aisha wants to take that or Mayor Poe.
I think wherever you want it to land, we're comfortable with.
We'll start with you, Aisha.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I think, you know, so much of the question regarding how centering guaranteed incomes in the conversation around racial equity really aligned to what we just heard from the senator. And I think that really goes back to, quite frankly, to what Dr. King started calling for over a half century ago, organizing for the Poor People's Campaign. He explained how the federal government provided white people with an economic floor which to build, shape, and nurture institutional white supremacy in the United States. And when King said, we're coming for our checks, he was very clear about generational wealth as one of the ways to surviving in a nation that prefers free black and brown labor to free black and brown people. It's very clear when we're having these conversations now, as we're beginning to talk more and more about guaranteed income and centering on the specific needs of a population, that it's very clear that in this country, we want the labor of brown and black people without the liberation. And a guaranteed income pushes back at that narrative. A guaranteed income says that we recognize the humanity of all people. We recognize the equity stake that all of us have, and that all of us should have an opportunity to not only have dreams, but to actualize those dreams, regardless of our skin color. And also for us, what we do with our guaranteed income is we take it a step further. We are saying that the work that we do specifically with our work with the Magnolia Mothers Trust is that we're going to center our efforts on those who have been systematically most left out of the conversations around equity because of the policies and systems that we have put in place. And we have intentionally centered our work on supporting Black mothers. And we're doing that because we recognize that you cannot have conversations about economic justice without having conversations about gender and racial justice. And we have to have those things simultaneously as we really begin to talk about, okay, how do we get to equity? How do we get to actualizing the dream that not only Dr. King had, but how do we get to actualizing that and making sure that it's a dream that can be lived out in the 21st century for all families? So.
Yeah, that's great. Mayor Poe, do you want to comment or add some thoughts to that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, first of all, for having me. We're very excited in Gainesville to join the income movement and recognize the equity gaps that exist as our first two guests have laid out. We're incredibly inspired and following on the great work of organizations like SEED and Stockton and the Magnolia Mothers Trust and Jackson. And where we start is that poverty is not a condition of one's character. It's to paraphrase Nelson Mandela, it's a creation. Poverty is created by human beings and therefore can be solved by human beings and by specific actions. And so that's the approach we're taking. And so in Gainesville, we have chosen to focus specifically on returning citizens who have been incarcerated. We know that, first of all, we don't need to go over the obvious, but a disproportionate share of incarcerated individuals in the United States and here in Florida have Black and brown skin. and have faced other systemic barriers previously in their lifetimes. Those barriers are magnified and exacerbated upon exit from the penal system and upon reentry to our communities. And so, we need to do more on the front end. Gainesville's working very hard on developing diversion and deflection programs, on providing a third option besides jail and hospital for people that are facing crisis and are in trauma. But we also want to deal with, all of our citizens that are coming back to us. And so, the barriers that our returning citizens face from not having social support networks in place to transition back into not having any income. I mean, very often folks are released with $100 in their pocket, not enough to even get a night in a hotel room, really. And then we expect them to somehow stabilize and be successful. There are obvious employment barriers, and then there's a lack of agency. I mean, they've been in a system in which they have zero agency, and then all of a sudden are expected to regain agency and somehow navigate a series of barriers that are incredibly difficult to overcome. I would say many purposefully erected to ensure their lack of success, and they're lacking hope. They've been beaten down by a broken system that has very deliberately taught them that they are not meant to be successful. So we believe that providing a guaranteed income, we're hoping to provide $600 a month for 24 months, will help alleviate many of those barriers. This will be in addition to any other support systems that are in place. We're working to get waivers from any other programs. So this, will not affect housing assistance or nutritional assistance or transportation assistance or anything else like that. It's the reincarceration rate like? What is the emergency room visitation rate like? All these metrics that we use to measure whether somebody is healthy and whether they're successful in their community and as an individual. We'll be tracking all that, but I think it all starts with basic dignity, and again, poverty is not a consequence of character. It's a systemic problem, and you don't solve poverty by wishing it away. You need to put money in people's hands and allow them the freedom and flexibility to make decisions as to how they can best utilize that money to lead a successful and fulfilling life. And that is our intention and goal. And we're very excited to get started. We hope that our first payments go out on October 1st.
That's very exciting news. Yeah, I mean, you talked, I think, a lot about sort of the financial benefits. And so I think I'm going to direct this question to Sarah Beth of SEEP, who's doing a tremendous amount of research. But, I think when we focus a lot on the financial benefits, we're often like overlooking a tremendous value of the intangible benefits of recurring cash. So, for one, freeing up folks to organize, to be more politically engaged. This is important for the individual, but, as well as a whole. So just, look at the work that, Black women did to flip Georgia twice in the last year or past year. So Sarah Beth, since you're with SEEP and you're heading is headed by one of the pioneers of that work, Stacey Abrams, can you sort of speak to the ways in which the organization fosters this kind of community participation? And if you think SEEP's work could be advanced by a guaranteed income?
Sure, and thank you all so much for including us. Really happy to be here. So we're a relatively new organization. Stacey Abrams founded us in 2019 to focus on 12 southern states and the policy areas of economic security, health, and climate. And so we really are a bridge builder across the region, connecting organizations and connecting across issue areas, and really trying to elevate the South into some of these policy conversations. And so I'm really glad that this is actually focused on the South today, because this is the region that all three of the speakers have talked about has really weak support systems by design. And there's hoops and barriers involved that just make it extremely difficult in the South, whether that's Medicaid expansion, minimum wage, a lot of these policy areas, we are kind of the gaping hole of putting these policies in place. And so I think it's really exciting that there's an appetite in the South to have these conversations and to move these pilots forward. And what we try to do is connect people who are doing good work and spread good ideas. And so one of the initiatives in the pandemic is the South Strong Initiative, which is bringing together more than 200 Southern organizations and scholars to have these conversations of what do we want for a post-pandemic South? This pandemic has been a huge disruption to our economy, to the way we live. So let's think big and let's have a big vision of what we want. And so I think these conversations, such as guaranteed income, are the exact conversations that need to happen of what is that bold vision for the South moving forward. I think that it's exciting on the federal level. We're seeing we might cut child poverty in half, right, by having cash come into families. We know that these things work. And so I think that now is the time to really be bold and to think big. What we do in community engagement is bring together leaders across the region who are on the ground, making that pivot in a pandemic of how do you do community engagement in a pandemic, and stay true to your community and continue to build relationships. And so we offer space for people those leaders to come together and think how we can do this in a new and different way. And then we really try to bring regional voices to policymaking. And so, for example, during the pandemic, we've partnered with a tech company, Propel, and their Fresh EBT app to ask the question of what do you want policymakers to know? And so these are typically low-paid workers in the South, a lot of them who can't make it to a community meeting at night to put their input into what's happening at the city council, right? And so we have to think of new and fresh ways to have their voice elevated. And one of the big things we heard was just the importance of cash in the pandemic, stimulus checks, to meet things like rent and utilities and childcare, and just the fact that it can relieve so much stress in these stressful times. And so coming out of this, we want to continue to make those efforts of having new ways to engage community. But what we really hear is, that financial relief can just give you that opportunity to be a part of your community in a new way that the financial stress really keeps you from being a part of. So we're excited to be here and look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you for that. We talked about sort of, community, activating them, political education. Aisha, I'm going to throw this question to you because you're actually, for the past 3 or 4 years I've known you, you have been doing this work, this grassroots, community-driven focused work with your program, Magnolia Mothers Trust. I'd love for you to sort of talk to us about, why did you focus on Black mothers, living in affordable housing, and what have you learned from this program?
Yeah, thank you for that question.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason we focus, Magnolia Mothers Trust is a part of a larger organization, Springboard to Opportunities, which are run. We started Magnolia Mothers Trust because we are an organization that's radically resident driven. And so we have to be responsive to the needs of the families that we work with. And about 3 years ago, our families started telling us that in spite of all of the programs and services that we were providing, they were still not being able to actualize their dreams. And the reason for that was it's really because of lack of financial services, the lack of cash, point blank period. And so we really started exploring what would that look like in order to provide our families the support that they need. And that led us down a couple of conversations simultaneously. It led us to having conversations around policy and our social safety net, and how our social safety net, specifically when you start talking about supports needed to Black women, is one that is really paternalistic, and it is one rooted in this narrative that does not allow for individuals to be successful. It's really not a safety net at all. It's really sort of like a strangulation net. And so we started having conversations around that, and about how do we be really intentional about the policies and the systems at play in changing those narratives. But then also, when we started looking at the data within those that we support, but also looking at the data of specifically Mississippi and our poverty numbers, and who is most harmed by our social safety net, and who lives in poverty levels in Mississippi that are just astronomical and are not shaped in humanity, it was Black mothers. In Mississippi, Black women make 61% of what white men make. Because of discriminatory employment practices, they have not been able to move up the economic ladder. Because of redlining, they have not been able to own homes at the same rate that white folks have. In Mississippi, children, Black kids, 1 in 4 live in poverty. So it was all of these reasons that we said, okay, if we are going to go out and be bold in the reality that we are going to give folks money, because this is in 2018, we did not have the pandemic and all of the enlightenment that the country has now had regarding the power of cash. We said, if we're going to be bold and say that we are going to trust individuals with money, we are going to be bold in calling out the individuals that we are going to give this money to, and recognizing that the reason we are centering our work on these individuals, on Black mothers, because they have been the ones who have been systematically left out of the equation of change. And if we're going to call for a new system, one rooted in dignity and humanity and allowing all of us to show up, we are going to make sure that Black women have a seat at that table, and that they are involved in writing the new equitable contract for this country. So that's why we were intentional in what it was that we did. And so that's where we started. So this is what we learned. Y'all, cash works. Oh my goodness. Who knew? Who knew? Cash is powerful, but cash is powerful for so many different reasons. Cash is definitely powerful as it relates to the consumer sovereignty, what you are able to buy, your purchasing power. Folks buy more stuff. People buy the things that they need. They pay off bills. They pay for cars. They pay for education. They're able to pay their rent. They're able to pay for food. Yes, cash does that. But the other piece that we don't have enough conversations about beyond the economic impact is we don't talk about the intangible benefits. We don't flip the script and begin to have conversations about how folks are able to show up in their lives, in their community, and how they're able to dream. And when we start talking about dreaming and we start talking about joy, a lot of times it's not. Those two things are not simultaneous with Black women, but it should be. We are seeing our families be able to show up with joy and be able to think about their future in a way that they never have before. We are seeing our moms say that for the first time they feel like they are good parents because they actually have the bandwidth to parent in a way that aligns to how they want to parent, that they can actually say yes to some of the things that their kids want, not just their needs. We're seeing individuals have their bandwidth not taxed, and the scarcity of having to live day by day just trying to figure out how to survive, that goes away. And so cash, yes, it's important in thinking about the day-to-day, moment-to-moment. But what we are seeing about the generational arc of this work and the long-term impact of this work, I think it's much more significant than the $12,000 that we provide to families annually.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree. And I actually am going to take a question from the audience at this point, since I think we have about, 15 minutes. We're at the top of the hour. So there's a question from Megan in the audience, and it says, with sort of targeted pilots, how do you prevent families from losing benefits? And I know Aisha knows that quite well, but maybe Sarah wants to chime in, or Mayor Poe.
I'd love to hear from Aisha. We're going through that process right now as we build out the design of our program to get the waivers to make sure that there's no disruption of any other services or benefits because of this income, and that's important to build and design up front. So I'm excited to hear from the other two panelists to make sure that we're thinking of everything before we go live.
Yeah. Sarah, did you want to add anything before I chime in?
Well, I'll just raise up for folks that are interested in that, the Atlanta Federal Reserve has just made an amazing benefits cliff simulator that can, if your community is interested in a pilot, you can go in there and kind of test it out and see just what benefits are threatened to be reduced. And so that can kind of help you make decisions about it. But the waiver process, definitely Aisha has experience in that.
Yeah, I know the waiver process is my jam, so let's do it.
Yes.
All right. So, we can definitely have conversations about waivers, and I'll talk about that. But I also think we need to have a conversation about why in this country we even need to go about getting waivers. It takes good government to have waivers as it relates to benefit requirements. But it's also problematic that when our countries, the way our system is set up, it is so punitive that any steps towards economic security means steps taken away as it relates to your security in this moment. That's problematic. And we need to begin to have conversations about that. So yes, those of us who are doing this work, we can think about the benefits cliff, we can think about waivers, but while we're doing that and making sure that we're not doing harm in this moment of doing good, we also have to be pushing the needle and not letting the government get away with changing the systems as we go about getting waivers. Because if we get a waiver, that allows them to hide behind the fact that this is messed up to begin with, that we need a waiver. So that's one soapbox. But how do we go about doing this? And doing our work, we were very clear to make sure that we were doing good without doing harm. And we worked with various economists. We didn't have the benefit of the Atlanta Fed benefits cliff now, which we did, but we worked with economists to come up with our best estimation of what the benefits reduction would be. We also knew our population and their income. So we knew that no one would lose benefits, because on average, our families make about $12,000 annually. We knew that benefits would be decreased, but we knew that no one would be kicked out of housing or anything to that regard. And so our assumptions were correct. We were able to see our first year, there was a reduction of benefits of about $300 to $400, but our family still had the net gain of $600 to $700, which they appreciated because it's cash. It's not a subsidy. It's not a voucher. And so I say, when thinking about the benefits cliff, make sure that you understand your population that you're working with. That is one of my biggest concerns right now, as individuals are rushing to do guaranteed income, that they are not thinking about the harm that can be done as you insert cash into individuals' lives. Because some benefits, if you lose them, it could take years to get back. Like if you lost your disability benefit, you may never get that again. So folks really need to make sure that they are clear about their population and that you're doing your due diligence. And if you have an opportunity to get a waiver, get waivers. But while you're getting the waivers, push the government to do what is needed in order to make sure it's not so punitive for families as they work to actualize their dreams. So.
Yeah, I love that you took us down that rabbit hole for a bit, because I don't think people have a good understanding about how convoluted our current social programs are and why cash just makes sense, right? I mean, it does, and I'm sure if we did the math on it, it makes more sense for direct cash programs. But yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize, the complexities and issues with TANF and sanctions, and there's no grace periods. Should you start to make more income? It's really problematic, and it's quite stressful, and there's absolutely no dignity in having conditional programs. So I'm also going to take another audience question. And I apologize, I don't think I have a name for this. This might be an anonymous question. So this person says, I'm curious about the panelists and the guaranteed income community's views and the push for reparations. I'm glad this person brought up this question. It seems like these could, be complementary pushes and versus for. I think this, Catherine might have asked this question. I'm really glad you brought up reparations. Does anyone on our panel want to discuss that or answer Catherine's question?
Anyone want to go first? I'll go, man. Take it.
Yeah.
Did the mayor raise his hand?
I think it was sort of a half raise. Oh, maybe he's muted.
There we go. I need someone to unmute me. This is such an important topic and conversation, and I'll just give you my perspective as a local leader. There are certainly ways that we as local governments can take part in that conversation and look for opportunities for restorative justice or reparations. I think my friend Mayor Gertz in Athens, Georgia, the University of Georgia are looking at a specific project where the university displaced African American neighbors and is looking to repair that damage. But this is an area where we can't let the federal government off the hook. I mean, that this needs to be part of a national conversation and a national solution, because these policies were institutionalized at a state and federal level. So I think what Mayors for Guaranteed Income is doing can be a part of that narrative, and we can show how we can start reversing systemic racism and how we can build better communities. But it's frustrating at a local level where everything sort of filters its way down to us, and we're expected to address every issue and problem because no one above us is. And as Aisha said, we're not going to let them off the hook. I mean, we need to make sure that they are held responsible and are going to take meaningful action to repair the damage that's been done through systemic racism.
And I would just agree and say that we've always thought of reparations as a federal responsibility, and we're excited that Senator Booker's and others' bill is taking that historic first step to start that conversation at the federal level to say this is an issue and that we have a responsibility to explore it.
Aisha, any thoughts? Oh, muted.
Yeah, definitely think it's a federal piece, but I also think that we have to be intentional with language. Reparations is very different than guaranteed income to me. Guaranteed income is term limited, supporting specific individuals based on whatever the parameters are. Reparations is full scale repayment for harm done to a particular group of people. $12,000 ain't gonna get it for Black folks, y'all. So it really needs to be an alignment to the harm that has been done. And so I think it's important to have conversations about reparations, but I don't feel that the two can be had simultaneously, because I feel as if they're two very different things for me.
Yeah, good point. I'm going to move into my final question, and then if anyone in the audience has more questions, please, drop them in the question box. But, since we're here talking about intersectionality, and I kind of just want to get everyone's thoughts here on the panel on how we build a multiracial effort across generations and class that keeps racial justice at the forefront of, economic justice work. I think this is especially important given sort of the widespread devastation of this pandemic, which we've all experienced. But, it's very obvious it's disproportionately hit Black and Brown communities. But it has led to sort of this increase of economic insecurity across the board. And at the time when so many people are hurting, how do we continue to bring people over to the idea of guaranteed income, or that lifting the most marginalized ultimately helps all of us? Mayor Pope, do you want to take that?
Sure, if I can be unmuted. There we go. So, this is not a complex idea. That's what I love about guaranteed income. People need money to survive, and this puts money in people's hands so they can make the best decisions for themselves and their families on how to prioritize that money. But we don't need to overthink this. Folks that have been receiving monthly Social Security checks for generations know the value of a guaranteed income. Folks that are receiving their child tax credit right now understand the value of a guaranteed income. We're not telling those folks how to spend their money. We're saying it's important. When Social Security came along, our elderly citizens were the largest group living in poverty. After Social Security, they're the smallest group living in poverty. This is something that we know works, and what we're excited about with Mayors for Guaranteed Income is helping build that data and helping build those narratives. There's very personal narratives that are going to allow us to share the positive experience and the impact that a guaranteed income can have with a variety of groups. So whether it's Black mothers or people re-entering society after incarceration, or a completely randomized group, we're going to get a greater and greater data set, and we're going to be able to tell the story much better. So I'm grateful for our partners here in Gainesville, Community Spring, and being able to really tailor and customize our program for a group whose story we think deserves to be told, and whose lives we believe need to be centered and elevated. And that's what every one of us participating with Mayors for Guaranteed Income is doing around the country. And once we get that back, it's going to be an incredibly powerful story to share with our state and federal leaders.
I would just say on the question of multi-generational, multiracial, invest in the South and invest in Black leaders and Black-led organizations, because they are bringing this big tent together. And the other issue I would say about expanding who supports marginalized, lifting marginalized communities, these are popular ideas. Medicaid expansion, $15 minimum wage, if it gets on the ballot, it passes by pretty big margins. And so a part of this is getting it a little away from politics, because public opinion supports it. And so if we can put this in front of people, I think that's the best way to generate support for it, and remove the politics a little bit from
it. Yeah. I agree with all that. And y'all, Sarah just said, send me a check. If y'all missed that, that's what she said. So, ditto to what she said. But when talking about how do we make sure with the long arc of this, I agree with everything that's said. And, Mayor Poe is right. This is not complex, the idea that cash works and we can give people money. But unfortunately, our relationship with poverty in this country is complex. We associate poverty with the moral failing. We don't really recognize that individuals are poor because of the systems that we have allowed to be put in place and perpetuated. And this last year, as more individuals have unfortunately had to deal with poverty in a very real way because of this economic and health crisis that we've been in, there has been this movement in this moment that we could have to pull at individuals' hearts. But as we move beyond that, how do we ensure that individuals' humanity continues to be connected to others, even when that's not their lived experience day to day? And that is really going to take all of us on the ground activating to ensure that we keep this idea and these issues at the front of mind of everyone, not just at the front of mind of individuals when it is something that they are struggling with, but that we really get to the place where we see how we are interwoven and how my humanity is connected to your humanity and your humanity, whether or not that's my lived experience. And that's going to take work. And that's going to take the narrative that Mayor Poe was talking about. That's going to take the narrative work that we're doing with my organization, that Sarah and them are doing with SEEK. It's going to be all hands on deck to really ensure that we take all of these programs and begin to move to the policies necessary to not just move the South forward and make sure that we have South strong, but to move the nation forward and make sure that we have full-scale implementation.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know Aisha and I have had side conversations about, just concerned that like privileged people are the ones that are, that we're focusing on and have been, we're bringing a lot of these issues to light right now during the pandemic. But, is that really going to be, are we really going to be focused on those who have always been impacted? And so, with guaranteed income and more pilots, popping up across the country, I think, that's why I'm still for these smaller targeted programs right now, but until we get a federal program. And so, thank you for that. And thank you to our panelists for sharing their wisdom. I just have one more final question I'd like to take from the audience. And this one's a question from Fiona, and it's specific to, the South, is how do you expect a guaranteed income to impact race relations and stereotypes in the South? Thanks for that question, Fiona.
Positively. It gives dignity back. I mean, it allows people to make good decisions for themselves that will help improve their lives, the lives of their families, help them uplift the rest of their community. It's going to be positive.
Anyone else? Well, I like leaving on a positive note. So thank you for that, Mayor. And we have Stacy back, but before, I just want to quickly just thank all of our panelists and everyone who joined us this evening, for this critical and timely conversation. And, thank you once again, Stacy and Income Movement, for hosting us. And I'll hand it off to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rennie, and thank you to each of you for joining us. I got a text from Reverend Liz Theo Harris's team. Her scheduler put it on her calendar for the wrong time. So this is one of those like little technical glitches that sometimes happen. They were in Mountain Time when they put it on the calendar, didn't realize it was not going on her calendar in Eastern. So, so she was here in spirit. She actually showed up 2 hours ago and was wondering what was going on, but the message didn't get connected to us. So apologies for not being able to hear from her. I know we'll have another opportunity in the future to bring her into the conversation, because the work that Poor People's Campaign does is just so important and critical. And they have a lot of wonderful things planned this summer. So we'll make sure that we bring her back into the conversation for the community. But I do want to thank everybody who was able to be part of this, this conversation today. The work you all are doing is just so critical. And we love hearing from so many different people who are coming from different perspectives, but like the kind of coalition building that's happening across the South is just super powerful. And really appreciate that you guys took some time today to talk more with us about the relationships between race and class and what guaranteed income and direct cash can do related to that. So at the very end here, I just want to remind people, the audience, we have next week, the third of our panel discussions, equity, safety, and autonomy, building economic systems that support women. And looking forward to seeing many of you with us next week for that. And in the meantime, have a safe, healthy, nice week ahead of you. That the weather here in Portland, Oregon is fantastic. I hope you guys are experiencing something similar. So be safe, take care, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Stacey, and everyone else.
Yeah.
Y'all be safe.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Peace.
Bye-bye.